many cynical administrators created these departments hoping that they would self-destruct in a very few years. I think that many of the people who gave the green light to Afro to get these students out of their offices in 68 and 69 would be amazed to come back to discover that Afro-American studies was thriving 30 years later.
This new subject, born in the late 60s, has changed forever the understanding of race in America. It's also helped the nation to do something we in Britain have yet to properly attempt, to confront the racial mistakes of the past.
You cannot effectively engage the larger world if you will to ignorance, if you will to deny the truth, facts, history, knowledge. And to the extent to which the United States, in fits and turns and with blood and struggle, has wrestled with these issues, it's a better country. The United States is a much better country because it was forced and accepted the challenge to confront its history.
Affirmative action and African American studies placed Black Americans in a position from which they've been able to create an intellectual revolution. In a single generation, they've radically rewritten American history and offered new perspectives across the curriculum. In so doing, some have become academic superstars, capable of leading the next phase of America's long struggle with race and the bitter divisions of its history.
You can measure the success of the Black Power movement by the number of Black intellectuals that you see defining the public discourse. And indeed, if you think about public intellectuals, intellectuals who really impact the discourse of the nation, a preponderant number are African Americans. Cornel West, Michael Eric Dyson, Henry Louis Gates, Colin Powell, and Condoleezza Rice, and others are now African Americans who are in positions of authority. That in business, today, the head of American Express, the heads of major corporations, Time Warner, are African Americans. They were all products of civil rights and Black power and its impact on American higher education. You would not have a Colin Powell unless you had a civil rights struggle to open the doors of City University of New York that allowed for him to be trained to receive his BA degree.
But the generation who benefited from affirmative action have also learned from the longer history of Black America's struggle for education. In their wake, they have helped to build a huge infrastructure dedicated to helping Black students get to university in America. It's one of the most impressive features of the civil rights and Black power legacy.
You have no bar to success in the United States if you're Black. The educational system is wide open. You can always get into college here.
The situation for young Black Britons couldn't be more different. There is no dedicated system to get Black British students into our universities. Although today's generation have managed to breach many walls, deep problems remain. And these problems begin in a British school system that seems to fail many Black students, leaving them underprepared for further study.
We've got an 80% failure rate amongst Afro-Caribbean boys in particular in terms of getting any sort of GCSEs at all. So 80% of all Afro-Caribbean boys in London are leaving school with a below C grade or no CSEs at all. And then the rate of application and entry into higher education and university is pitiful, as you would expect with that low GCSE level rate.
For those Black pupils who do make it through the British school system, the failures of the past mean that many feel too alienated by the absence of Black staff and students in our top universities to even apply. This helps create a new form of self-exclusion.
Today, I think what's really a shame, and in fact a scandal, is that there are students, Black students with 3 A's who are ending up in what we could call universities that are not our best, not considered our elite universities. If you have a ranking of universities and you're qualified to go to what is considered the most elite ones, And you choose not to do that because there are so few black students there. Yet you go to the one down the road because your friends are there or because there's a sense of community. Then there's a real issue here.
If I was an 18-year-old considering going to university in general or going to the university where I teach, and I saw a sea of white faces in the student body, a sea of white faces amongst the faculty, I would not think that that institution had my best interests at heart as a black person. There's nobody black teaching there. There are very few black students there, and you're going to therefore question whether that's a place you want to go. I would go as far as to say that universities in Britain, particularly red brick universities, are anti-black. They make very little effort to recruit black students, make next to no effort to recruit and retain black staff, and in terms of the subjects, they make a trivial effort at best to look at blackness, black history, black culture, or subjects from a black perspective.
The rejection of our top universities by young black Britons contributes to another aspect of the problem that it seems is set to continue, the lack of black British lecturers. Whilst black Americans have been developing as the new stars of the intellectual world, here, black people remain hugely underrepresented in the staff rooms of our universities. In Britain, only 1 in 250 university lecturers is a black Briton. Even the Metropolitan Police Force is today more representative of the ethnic makeup of modern Britain than the staff of our universities. The current situation is not new. Of the few black Britons who've made it through our university system over the years, many have had to leave, finding their talents better recognized abroad.
There was an amazing brain drain. So many of my friends who went to university here, who went through it and got higher degrees and so on, almost immediately, this was through the late 50s and 60s, almost immediately could get jobs in Africa, the Caribbean, or Asia, and they went. Once you got those educational qualifications, then you could go anywhere. You didn't have to stay here and be discriminated against.
I remember when I was an undergraduate, we were at this very well-known university, school, studying African history, studying African languages and so on. And yet there were no African lecturers around. And we found out there was this black lecturer had suddenly arrived from the US, and this created, amazing excitement amongst the black undergraduates. By word of mouth, people said, "There's this black academic who's speaking." Some tiny little meeting had been organised for her. So we kind of rounded everybody up, and probably about 30 of us piled into this tiny room and, were overwhelmed that a black academic actually existed.
So there's evidence to support that. As a black lecturer in Britain, I have no role models. There is nobody who is African Caribbean from Jamaica, like myself, 10, 15, 20 years older than me, who has been a mentor to me. I've had to look to North America or the Caribbean for mentors. So if you're a black lecturer in Britain at this point in time, it's an isolated existence, it's a lonely existence. It's you plus nobody else. In fact, to be more specific, at Birmingham University where I teach, I am the only born here African Caribbean member of staff.
Britain's universities are now so far behind those of America in terms of creating a place for black staff, students, and subjects that we are now losing yet another generation of our few black academics, mainly to the US.
When I talk to my black colleagues about what they intend to do with their futures, their academic careers, the majority of them are trying to leave Britain. Very few of them want to stay here. It's just not a good place to be a black lecturer. There is a black brain drain. It's gone on for quite some time, and it's just much more marked now because we're much more sensitive about race. We are an impoverished nation when it comes to taking seriously black intellectuals.
Britain's failure to nurture its own black thinkers has implications far beyond the lecture halls. Our journey towards becoming a truly multicultural society has been made all the more difficult and traumatic because of the absence of these black intellectual voices to analyze the situation and lead the national debate. From the Colour Bar and the Notting Hill riots to the murder of Stephen Lawrence and the Macpherson report, Almost every forward step on that journey has only come after a crisis.
Britain needs a certain level of expertise in dealing with its problems of racial inequality and racial hierarchy. Nobody thought that it was worth pausing over what it might take to try and develop forms of education that could speak to British experience, British conditions, and the distinctive cultural and political patterns of Britain.
The Stephen Lawrence report has been long awaited as a potential watershed in race relations.
I don't think the rhythm and tempo of British racism can be just left to take care of itself. It needs to be worked on. It needs to be part of a political settlement in the country. Now, I think that educational institutions, I think that educational initiatives around the development of black history and understanding of black politics in the country can play a very special role in fostering the best outcomes